All right, Christopher Knowles, thank you for being on the show. Christopher Knowles, he has a new book out, XF Ultra, and it's about the X Files. And there it is. There's a physical copy right there. I'd hold mine up, but mine is a Kindle copy. Christopher Knowles is also known for kind of the grimoire of synchromysticism, which really is a great, book you might say to check out before XF Ultra. Yeah, the Synchromistic Handbook. Um, would you say that the Synchromistic Handbook is kind of helps to people to understand XF Ultra, or can they just go right into XF Ultra? It seems like they're both standalone.
They're both standalone, but can't hurt to read both.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
Yeah. And
Because I do mention the X-Files in this because
yes,
it's a very highly resonating synchromistic phenomenon, let's just say.
oh, absolutely. And so yeah, so one of the best places, I guess, to where can people find your stuff? Now, I know they can just simply search XF-Ultra on Amazon and your book's going to come up. But also online, your presence is mostly on, I would say, is it Patreon?
Well, it depends. Patreon is where I put most of my energy into, but I also have a Substack, which is the Secret Sun Extension School. And then I still have the Secret Sun blog and also the Secret History of Rock and Roll blog. So
okay.
I'm all over the place.
Gotcha.
I'm all over the place.
Gotcha. I know most of those. I'll have to make sure I get links to. I'll find links to all of those, so I put them in the show notes just so people can, find it easy. But yes, XF Ultra. And if people get the the Kindle version, very, 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 very good. Paperback version, the hardback version. I think the hardback version has a little bit of extra content in it.
Has a lot of extra content in it.
Yeah. So that's really
greatly expanded. It's 43 pages of additional material.
Wow. And you have images in that too, right?
No.
Okay.
It's a whole thing with copyright and everything like that. I mean, if I wanted to use images from the program, I'd have to get clearances, and I could do like self-generated images, but that always looks kind of cheesy and corny. So
yeah, AI at this point looks like AI. People have an eye for it. If they're reading XF Ultra and the Synchromistic Handbook, they know AI when they see it.
Yeah. It's tempting, but I'm really not, unless you sign up for like Midjourney or what is it, DALL-E, like one of the really good image generation AIs, like the stuff you get through ChatGPT and Grok and so on is really pretty lackluster. You really need to use one of the higher end AIs, but those things are expensive.
They are.
And they not only are they expensive, but they limit you a certain amount of images generated per month. So so what are you going to do? And plus people are already just very anti-AI already. So
they certainly are. Yeah. Well, so we, Erin, one of the other rating creator here at the studio, she's like an artist by trade, and so she gets things printed at print houses, and now they have like certifications to certify that something is not AI generated. So people are getting tired of it, and they want to see that certification, not AI, because, yeah. Big difference between like the actual brush and the prompt for sure, and so
I mean it's good for certain things. I mean, I'll use it for thumbnails and so on, but I don't think I would ever, I don't know. There is a project that I will keep to myself, but that could use AI in an interesting way. But that the whole look of AI has just become really tired, and we all see it, and it's kind of violating that whole uncanny valley thing, and
Hmm.
Where we all recognize that this is fake. And,
Yeah.
I mean, I've always said that CGI ruined movies.
Mm.
I really believe that. It just got to be so ubiquitous. But now, since Hollywood doesn't want to pay for it anymore, CGI has gotten really bad. So we've had
Mm.
like this definite decline in the quality of CGI because it's expensive and it's hard work. And like I said, studios don't necessarily want to pay for it. But, losing that sense of reality, I think, really damaged film. And that's why I'm so drawn to like low budget and independent and obscure film, stuff that you're not going to see a lot of CGI.
Yeah.
I just got so tired. Like the example I always use is Van Helsing. So there's this movie called Van Helsing that came out like 20 years ago, and I forget who was in it, but I hated it so intensely. Like I didn't just like dislike it. I hated it. I like felt sick watching it for real. And there's some other movies at the time. There was like I Am Legend, and it's just
Yeah.
they've ruined a good story with all this over the top CGI crap that is geared towards people who watch video games and not film. Basically,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's absolutely true.
film should be a reflection of real life, in my estimation. Film should always be depicting things that are really happening in the physical world.
Yeah. Well, AI, I think I will be impressed with AI when they can do my taxes. How about that? But I can say, AI, just do my taxes. I
I
mean,
could
like,
use that today.
yeah, it's like all things are already known. Like, I mean, like the man already knows all this stuff. Why do I have to be their administrative assistant to recreate what they already know? It's like, just AI, do my taxes. I'll be like, I'll be all about the singularity. Let's bring it on, Well, so one thing when it comes to, of course, old school stuff that is not CGI ridden. Well, that's the X-Files, and that's what the book is about, XF Ultra. And so I've been blasting through it and really enjoying it. And this is the thing. I just wanted to mention that I think so. A couple months ago, it just struck me to start to watch the X-Files again. I mean, I've been through it many times, and it just struck me, you know what? I want to watch the X-Files again. And so started cruising through it and got to about season 3 a couple of weeks ago and got halfway through it and stopped and remembered how season 3 was always my favorite season. And I didn't know that you were writing this book. And then boom, I do follow your work. And then boom, it showed up. And I went, wow, this is amazing. So there's this, synchronicity. And I thought, wow. So I got it. And one thing about the book is that it matches something. I'm a little out there, so I always tell people I'm a little bit crazy. So I think that the X-Files is sort of being called back. I think that people need it again. I think it's actually proving to be timeless. Not all things are timeless. Some things are, and I think it just takes time to pass to actually find out what was timeless.
Yeah.
And I think that the X-Files, along with the book that you did, corresponding with it, I think it's time. Do you feel that this is a time, it's being called back, like we need it again?
I don't know if the need ever went away.
Mm.
I mean, everything has its peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
Everything has its time. The X-Files was very much like 90s, like 93 to 98 was really the golden age. That was really where the show made its reputation and I think really did its best work. But I don't think, these kind of stories, they might go out of fashion, but I don't think they're ever not alive and relevant to our situation today.
Yeah. And it holds up. I mean, I hadn't watched it for a couple of years and started watching it again. And of course, you just realize watching it, this still holds up. It doesn't feel like I'm watching a TV show that was made in the 90s. It still seems like relevant. And so I think that one of the things I think maybe that brings back the X-Files at this time, or I shouldn't say brings it back, but I just noticed people are watching it. Like before your book came out, I realized I'm just noticing people are getting into it, that I know people are just talking about it again. And so it seems like this is really a time for intuition. Like, I guess my day job is trading. So I'm always looking at the market, and so I just realized, like, well, most people know that we're probably in for, financial stress if one's not already in it. Things are changing, geopolitically, the world's crazy, but it seems that like intuition does not hurt at this time. And it seems like to me, watching the X-Files kind of reinvigorates one's intuition. It's almost like it gets you thinking, to like the truth is out there and you got to figure it out. Nothing is as it appears.
Well, it asks the big questions.
Yeah.
And a lot of movies and TV shows don't do that. They don't ask the big questions that everybody kind of ponders. Why are we here? How did we get here? Where are we going? Where do we come from? I mean, all those kind of big existential quandaries that I think everybody kind of experiences. And if you ask those questions, you're going to, and it's not automatic and it's not a given, but I think if you do ask those questions, it gives you a bit more depth and a bit more duration, let's just say, than things that are just there for entertainment. There's this, the reason I wrote this book.
Yeah.
The reason I wrote this book is because I feel like people aren't watching the show correctly.
Yes.
Right? I mean, they don't realize, most people, who watch the show just don't recognize all the layers that are just built in, layer upon layer upon layer. And that's really what I wanted to address, is the fact that if you watch the show the way it's supposed to be watched, you're going to, it's like you're going to watch an episode and like think, all right, now I have to just sit there and think about it for the next hour or two, because this is so much. And there's so much meat on the bone. And I don't think there are a lot of TV shows like that, or movies or books or anything, where the levels of meaning don't necessarily call attention to themselves. And again, that's why I wrote the book, because I think that, you don't really have these writers and producers, whomever, running around telling you what they were thinking. And, in fact, they do the exact opposite. Chris Carter is extremely Sphinx-like. He'll talk a lot, but he won't really talk a lot about what drives him and what inspires him.
Yeah, and when you mentioned watching the X-Files correctly, like I had no idea that I wasn't, and then I realized that I was. I never. So the thing is, when one gets the book, and it's actually I couldn't help but think it's a great thing to do with, well, the family or one's partner or friends or whatever, however it works, because remember, back in the day when the 90s was happening, and Friday night was a big deal. We all got together because it was a community thing. Oh, the X-Files is on. Yeah. And so Friday night, it was always a get together,
right.
And you were looking forward to it. It was great, And so now I think that could be reinvigorated, especially with this book, because people can get into, so you can look at the season that's coming up, and then you list all the things that were going on at that time. And so you see, oh my gosh, and then that sets the stage. You start realizing, well, these are all the events in the world that were happening at that time, and you go, wow, this season is going to be good, because somehow it all kind of gets pulled in some way. There's a relationship there. It speaks of the time it was made, I think, and then. And then, so you get this big, okay, this is what was going on. Then you start talking about that season. And of course you have kind of like the, well, I forget how you termed it, but the like insider info on that, supplemental intelligence and stuff like that, so you add in like they call it like the synchromistic many layers of the episode, well, of the season, then the episode, but then also just extra information that most people wouldn't know, that's like really cool. Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. And then of course you break down the episodes, and I think the thing is, now that is definitely a way to bring, to get people together, to bring the X-Files, well, not back to life, but like I say, I think it's time for it again. And I think that the book really helps, because now people aren't just watching it. This just makes it, I think this is what Chris Carter and the May who created it really had in mind. This kind of like really opens it up, because most people only like, they don't have the knowledge that you do. And they don't have like the OCD. They're not studying it. I mean, the amount of work that's in this grimoire is incredible. It's
Wait, what's
incredible.
that?
The amount of work in this book is incredible.
Yeah.
The amount of
Thank you.
research
I'm
and
glad.
knowledge. Yeah, I mean, this book. I tell everybody, this book didn't just happen. Okay.
No, it took a very long time, and I worked very hard too. I'll just hold this up. I don't know if you can see that. So it's the Kindle version is going to give you all the information.
Yeah.
But I worked very hard to arrange it so you can digest it more easily. In the printed book, I worked very, very hard, like maybe even too hard, to set it up. Sort of the conceit is like it's meant to be like files. It's meant to be like,
oh yeah,
like an FBI report, right? It's meant to not that I was modeling on FBI reports, but that's sort of the conceit, that I wanted to have. I just wanted to have a little bit more interest, a little bit more visual appeal, rather than just hitting people over the head with a lot of information. So I wanted to sort of give the impression that you are looking at like files and or reports or whatever, because not only is it the obviously the conceit of the show, but because of all the information that's either upfront or sort of put in there surreptitiously, I wanted to approach it that way, that what you're really seeing is like almost like declassified information.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I use that term a lot in the book, but I really wanted to just put that over, that people can. It is a bit. I don't want to say it's a bit of a LARP, but it's a conceit. But it's like I just find it more engaging, that people can feel that like they're studying this as some sort of secret file, right? So
yeah. Well, and the thing is,
anyway.
Yeah, and people don't need to know. So the thing is, if people now, some people, like myself, are going to start at the beginning, read all the way through it, right? But let's say you have friends coming over, or you want to introduce people to it. Really, say your friends come over for an X-Files party, right? You're going to watch some X-Files, All they really need to know is you can say, okay, check out like one of my favorite seasons. I found out in the book that season 3 was Chris Carter's favorite season, and I thought, I agree. Season 3 had it. It just to me, it was just perfect, And so you mentioned, so in the book, if people were looking, they could go straight to A Season of Conspiracy, 1995 to 1996, and it gets through all the things that were happening that season. Like, the Washington Post and the New York Times published Industrial Society and Its Future, aka the Unabomber Manifesto. CIA Shutter Stargate. I mean, all this stuff, and you go, whoa, wait a second. This begins to set the tone.
Well, that's the point. Yeah.
Yeah. And people go, oh, okay. So that's what was going on. All right. And then it gets into Case Files, season 3, and then you mentioned another Myth Arc episode, and you go into, kind of an overview, then you break down every episode. And the thing is, I mean, if people have this, and if you have a kind of a get together, or maybe just by yourself, that's fine too, but especially if you have to get together with other people, they can just go along. You could buy season 1, season 2, 3, and they could just sit there and you all could go through it together. And that's really going to be, that's going to be, at least to me, a pretty great time.
I hope so. That's kind of the intended effect. I do want people to go back and watch these episodes with this information under their belt. It'd be good if they read the entire book first, so they can. Yeah. But I understand if some people might not want to do that, but there's so much, and you mentioned the hardcover version.
Yes.
I go more, I have chapters on like Patriot Act, Edward Snowden. What else? I'm blanking out right now. But I have a number of different chapters on, going deeper into some of these issues that were happening in and around. And there is in the soft cover and in the KDP, the Kindle version, I talk about Gary McKinnon, the UFO hacker. I talk about Max Spears, and I also talk about Kyle Odom. Now, those names might not mean anything to people today, but those are all people whose lives basically played out X-Files stories, in real time. And I also, in the expanded version, I talk about some of the cults. There were a lot of cults in the X-Files. I don't know if you ever noticed that, but I wanted to go into some of the cults that inspired the cults that you see on the screen, right? So again, I mean, you can't separate art from history. Like everything exists. So you said that X-Files is timeless, and in your way, you're right, but it's also of its time.
Yes.
And that's what I really worked very hard to put into the book is like, here's what's going on at the time. This is what's inspiring the stories. And also, in the supplemental intelligence sections and everything, put as much of that information as I could fit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, the book, the paperback is, how many pages do I got here? 360 pages is, the paperback, and the hardcover version's over 400 pages. So I wanted to really put as much as that flavor in as I could. Like I didn't want to talk about Pogs and Ninja Turtles and Super Soakers. I mean, all the other things that I could talk about in the 90s, right? I mean, all the other things that were going on. I do talk about that a bit in the expanded version. I talk about like some of the music and everything, and how the X-Files was very much inspired by the music that was happening at the time. But you can't, things do emerge from the time, and it's what they call the zeitgeist. The zeitgeist. You capture the spirit of the age, right?
Yeah.
And the best outcome, in some ways, is when you capture the spirit of the age, but you capture the spirit of all the ages.
Yes.
I mean, like that you become more universal and not just focused on those specific events and conditions that were inspiring you at the time.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say it's like Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth, the series of interviews that him and I forget his name did.
Bill Moyer.
Yeah. And so like that, that's truly timeless. I think I hope we're watching that in 100 years, And so I think the X-Files and the way you presented it, I think the way you presented it actually will help X-Files do that.
Well, see, but I'm glad you brought up the Joseph Campbell thing, because I have a rather lengthy section in here where I talk about all the parallels to ancient mythology. So that the X-Files mythology, as it's known, that term mythology, and that was the first show that the term mythology was used about. It was the first show that the term like ships, relationships was used about. But I wanted to really go into all the mythic parallels that these stories are drawing upon, particularly like Orpheus and Eurydice. You talk about the X-Files feature film, the first feature film. That's just straight up Orpheus and Eurydice. I mean, it's so obvious. It's you don't even have to like get out your little charts and graphs. I mean, it's all right there. Scully is bit by the bee. and then she descends, she's dragged down to the underworld, which like a literal underworld where you have this giant spaceship in the middle of Antarctica and so on.
Yeah.
So that's just straight up Orpheus and Eurydice, which repeats throughout the series.
Yeah.
The first renderings of Orpheus and Eurydice are really, baked into the very first episode with Mulder's sister. And she's like the Eurydice, and then Scully sort of becomes Eurydice. And then there's this whole interesting storyline in the second season where Mulder, like, he has to choose, like, am I going to rescue Samantha, my old Eurydice, or am I going to rescue the new one? And I won't spoil how that all turns out if you haven't seen the episode, but that's a very interesting moral dilemma to sort of face. Who do I sacrifice? And that is another through line. It's like this whole idea that people are being sacrificed, not in like a ritualistic setting necessarily, but like people taking the fall for others, or taking the fall themselves to sort of for the greater good, or whatever the situation might be. But it's all about like there's actually a bit of dialogue. It's like it's all about who's willing to sacrifice, who's willing to give up something important for the greater goal.
No, it makes sense. And a line from the book I liked was, like the Gnostics, Mulder believes in a greater truth, the alien presence on Earth, as an example. This is being suppressed by worldly authority, the Syndicate. And I wanted to bring up the Syndicate, but also you mentioned in the book that Chris Carter didn't want to make Mulder too heroic. Let him be a bit clumsy, let him be kind of struggling. And I think that really helps people, at least guys, like identify with him, because you can go, yeah, I'm looking for that. The truth is out there. I'm kind of doing what he's doing on a certain level, and I screw up, and I'm impetuous, and but yeah.
Well, that's another thing I'm glad you brought up, because when I was working in advertising and such, I'd be working like crazy late night hours, and I would always have like audiobooks going.
Yes.
And I used up all the good audiobooks after a while, and then I started listening to like James Patterson novels or something, and or Stuart Woods novels, whatever. And I just hated the fact that the lead characters are always perfect. They're always like top of their class at Harvard, and can do a 4-minute mile, and have won the Ironman decathlon several times. It's just like so boring. These characters are just what they call Mary Sue's, right? Just self-inserts. It's just wish fulfillment. Oh, I'm going to be perfect. I'm going to self-insert myself into this character, and this character is wonderful and perfect and infallible. And that is just so boring, because it's not even remotely realistic. But I don't think people read, James Patterson novels for realism. Oh my goodness.
Well, the Syndicate, in the book, you mentioned that you had kind of mixed emotions, like mixed feelings about the Syndicate being revealed in season 3. Before then, I think you see Smokey once in a while, and you're kind of like, who's this guy? And he played an amazing part. I mean, and you see him in season 3, especially, very ruthless. Like, his little soldier guys aren't even dead yet, and he's like, clean these guys up. They're not even dead yet. They will be. Whatever.
Yeah. Is that really, the prognosis?
Yeah. He really shows his true colors in season 3. But then we see the Syndicate at large. And so you'd mentioned you had mixed emotions about them being revealed, because the mystery is more scary. The mystery is. But what I was thinking is, and this is the thing about how you might say myths evolve through time. I think even the show, like the X-Files, can continue sort of evolving, even though it's statically done, because now we do see the Syndicate. I think if you look at the world now, most people who would have an interest in the X-Files, who like always knew, I knew there was more to it. I caught some of it, but now I can really go deep, right? Most people are going to have an interest in the X-Files, and in your book. I mean, is the Syndicate really hidden anymore? anyway. So
not
is
so
it?
much anymore. I mean, it
Yeah.
seems like it's getting, exposed every day. But it's exactly what you said. It's like, I just felt that when we didn't see, a bunch of old dudes smoking in some sort of parlor on
Yeah.
East 46th Street in Manhattan, it just gave it, what you don't see and what you can't perceive is always more frightening than what you can see. Once you can put like names and faces on these characters, they lose a lot of their mystique, but also a lot of their terror. And if you look at the episodes before they were introduced, specifically in the first 2 seasons, you never like who's what's going on, like who's the smoking man, like who's he work for, why is he doing the things he does. In the first season, they had this character played by Jerry Hardin called Deep Throat, and you're never really sure what his loyalties were or what his motivations were. In the second season, they had this character called Mr. X, and he was really opaque. You're just like, what? Who is this guy? Like, what is his agenda?
Yes.
Who does he work for? Like, what does he do? And once you start answering those questions, I think it just takes a lot of the fun out, because it takes a lot of the mystery out.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And when you don't know the threat that you're facing, it's more terrifying, because it's the question of the unknown, right? And I think the unknown and the unseen is really at the basis of really effective horror. Now, that's something that Chris Carter always said. He said, what you don't see is more frightening than what you do see.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that's when the power of imagination kicks in. And it's always like, your worst fears. That's always going to be your go-to. Like, what's the worst that could possibly happen here? And that's sort of what your mind instantly goes to. And I mean, those characters were all very well written.
They were, yeah.
But at the same time, I just felt like, I really like what they call the well manicured man, which is the John Neville character. I love the scene in Paperclip when he just basically spells out the entire conspiracy.
Yeah, right there. Boom. Yeah.
In that hothouse, right?
Yeah.
After he's killed, the guy who owns it.
Yeah.
But anyway,
moments ago.
but and that's the other thing that's great about that character too, is that he's so suave and smooth, but he's a killer. We see him.
Yeah.
We don't see him kill that character in Paperclip, but we don't see him kill the character in what is it in the feature film, the character played by Martin Landau, but we know he does. So that's sort of like, that adds like a little bit of friction. It's like, he seems to be so smooth and helpful, but he's a killer. He's dangerous, and I think that is kind of the basis of a really interesting character, is paradox, the paradoxical character who seems to have aspects to their personalities that violate our expectations.
Yeah. And one thing about seeing the Syndicate that I think is really fun, it gives insight into things, is so Smokey, the smoking man, there's that one great episode, and I totally forget what it's called and what the season it is, but it's the one where Smokey is you see his history, where like he shot JFK, and like his dream is to be like a
Musings of a Cigarette Smoking Man, 4th season.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, and his like dream is to be a writer, and he finally gets something published, but they change the ending, and I guess you're kind of humanizing this rather ruthless character, but especially in season 3, you see where he screws up a lot. He can't seem to get that darn tape back, So you see, and I think that's one of the things about the Syndicate that I sort of liked, because since the syndicate is no longer underground, on some of it is, of course, right? But since we kind of are seeing the syndicate, the fact that now that this is our reality, we know who the syndicate is to a great extent, or to some extent. Maybe we were just learning. It's funny. I was going to ask about like Gen X. Like the X-Files is very tied to, I think, Gen X. That's one of its things about being of its time. And so like we, when the first season or two hit, I think like the internet wasn't really there for people till about 96. And so like we didn't really know who the syndicate was. So to kind of hide it a little bit made sense, but yet it brought it out, and now it is out. And the way they portrayed the syndicate was that they're ruthless, they're murderers, but they're kind of incompetent. They actually do screw up quite a lot.
Well, failure is always more dramatically interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Failure. It's interesting too, because Dave Duchovny has a podcast now called Fail Better. And the awesome. Whole idea is like, you learn more from your failures than you do your successes. So you mentioned that whole idea that Mulder isn't a superhero. He's a very smart dude, but he has his limitations. Now that to me is what makes for interesting storytelling.
Yes.
The limitations that we face and how we fail and the different ways that we fail, right? That makes interesting stories. And like I said, the counter example of that is all these stupid thrillers that I would listen to on audiobook where nobody was fallible. Infallibility is very boring.
Yeah.
So, but the thing with the syndicate is that it was a plot device, and I think it was a plot device that kind of outwore its welcome.
After season 3, I think it did. I got sick of it.
Yeah.
It's as you mentioned, some of your favorite episodes, or maybe your favorite episodes are the one and done. So it's a standalone top to bottom. It has a resolution, and I always liked those. And at least until season 3, that was the extended ones. They were good, but yeah, I would say that you're like after about season 3, I myself was like, I love the episodes that were standalone. Because the syndicate and the black goo and all was really getting, it was kind of wearing on me. It was getting a little boring.
It was hard to follow. It was very hard to follow. And I'll tell you something. I didn't really, well, it depends, because, people will lump like the mythology and just like everything that has to do with aliens, whatever. Now, what I just described that as in my own thinking was those are the conspiracy episodes. And the conspiracy episodes were when you ever saw the syndicate and everything. And those are the episodes that I just started to feel like this is just homework. This is just a little too, I don't want to say convoluted, but it was just very hard to follow. It was very hard to, very hard to keep track of, especially when they separate all these stories throughout the season. Hold a sec. No, that's not the one I want. Okay.
There you are.
There we go. This is my old camera that I have camera issues. I have a new camera, but it's I don't like it. So I mean, it's fine, but it's always like moving around and refocusing.
Oh yeah.
It drives me nuts. Anyway, so yeah, I those episodes, which kind of end in the 6th season, right, with 2 fathers and 1 son, and that's when they basically kill all those characters off. So that was what I saw as a conspiracy, because the episodes after those characters were killed off, I didn't really see in the same way, even though they're all kind of objectively mythology episodes, but I didn't see them that way. And I didn't even know the term mythology until much later. Like I said, I called those the conspiracy episodes. And we're just piling on, enigma after question after mystery after, unresolved plot line. And it just gets to be wearing. at that time, I really appreciated the stories with beginnings, middles, and
Yes.
ends. You know that, and it was, again, it wasn't until much later that when I actually went back and watched those episodes in order. And actually, what had happened is that in 2005, Fox had released these 4 box sets that were all the mythology. One was called Abduction, and then Black Oil, and then Colonization, and then Super Soldiers. And that's when I watched those episodes all in order, and I was just like, oh, now I get it. But that's a lot to ask people on a Sunday night, and they got to
Yeah.
go to work tomorrow morning. It's like they don't feel like getting out their little Etch-a-Sketch or whatever, and keeping track of all the plot lines. I mean, there is a danger, and I think the show Lost kind of fell into this trap as well, where it's called Mystery Box, and it's like to present the viewers with this quandary that's at the center of your entire storyline. And those types of series, particularly those types of series, tend to always disappoint people. One reason being is that they're always sort of just resolved rather offhandedly, but also people's ideas and theories and emotions and all the rest of it are always much more immediate and appealing to them than however the story is actually going to be resolved. And just think about all these series that kind of come to an end, but have this like basic mystery that needs to be resolved in the center of them. I can't think of too many examples of that it ended well. I mean, most of these things don't end well, and a lot of it's like people don't want these stories to end; they want them to go on forever. But
Yeah.
so that was a big thing, like in the early 2000s. Like Lost sort of kicked that off, and I do write about that in the book. But it's just very, very hard to ask people to keep track of all these storylines week after week after week. I mean, that problem has kind of been solved in the streaming era when you can just binge.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Yeah. And then and of course there was I mean, there was a week between each episode, and
Sometimes a lot more, sometimes a month.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that.
Oh yeah. I mean, that was back in the rerun days.
Okay, yeah. I think I saw some of the X-Files like first run. I guess I'm a little I'm not under 50, so I saw them when they were and it was always quite the so I thought they were every week, but I don't know, that was a while ago. At least when they were first run, right? Maybe not. Maybe not. Yeah. Well, here's one: The Lone Gunman, right? And I have to throw it out there. I wish they never made The Lone Gunman like standalone TV series. I thought it was just
awful.
It was awful. And the thing was, because like the Lone Gunman were so cool in the X-Files. When that TV show came out,
characters,
supporting characters, but I loved him, and I was like, when the TV show came out, I thought this is going to be the greatest thing ever, and it sucked. Oh, it was so disappointing. One of the great crimes against humanity right there, because there was so much potential.
And the really upsetting thing about it is that basically that show was run by Vince Gilligan, who went on to do Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul.
Oh, okay.
Guy's an absolute genius. But sometimes geniuses have their limitations, and I guess his limitation would be writing consistently effective comedy, which is really, really hard. Writing comedy is extremely hard. Because you have to surprise people all the time, and after a while, people sort of figure out, your formula. And but the Lone Gunman was just absolutely dreadful. I watched it, I think maybe once or twice, the entire series, and I was just like, I never need to see that again.
Yeah, and when I look back at it now, I realize it probably would have been somewhat challenging to write because the thing was in the X-Files, the lone gunman, you've got Richard Ringo Langley, Melvin Frohickey, and John Fitzgerald Byers, and Frohickey, who always reminded me of the arm in Twin Peaks, but he these great characters, and I think they were, to me, like watching the X-Files, you're always like, because it was about that time. Like I was working in, I was living in LA, Pasadena to be exact, I guess, and working at this internet startup, that internet startup. There was like, they really were kind of like maybe many people's first introduction into like, well, what is like a hacker? What is like a computer guy, And in the pilot episode, they were really, they played a pretty good part. You understand, here's their history, here they are. And I just thought, to me, I was always like, these are the guys I wish I could hang out with.
I actually did hang out with them.
You did? Oh, wow.
Yeah, not well. I've met the actors, but like before the show even came on, like late 80s, early 90s, I was hanging out with like a bunch of cyberpunk hacker types, one of whom was basically just a younger version of Frohickey, straight up and down. And he was, I don't think I have any pictures of him. I could probably get some, but he just was Frohickey.
Wow.
Straight up and down. And these guys were all like, very early adopters on computers and the internet and everything. And that's why when those characters first show up in the first season, I was like, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. I was like, I know these guys, because I was hanging out with people like that, like every weekend. And there was another character before then that was sort of like the prototype for the lone gunman, character called Max Fennig. That is very much sort of the prototype for the lone gunman. And, that I was into that whole scene, I was really into cyberpunk and all the rest of it. And I was hanging out with hackers. So, that definitely gave me a little bit of a charge there. I was like, oh my God. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
I know this world.
Yeah. And you mentioned in the book, Mulder and Scully being like twin soul, and the idea that like they needed, they wanted each other. And you mentioned that really cool word, I have written down here. Syzygy, yeah. So they were, and so that's one thing people in the book, we definitely get deep into their relationship, gosh, in like so many levels. But something I thought about the lone gunmen were kind of supporting characters, but they all were guys who hadn't met that twin soul. Like, it's almost like they all needed girlfriends to actually be Mulder. You know what I mean? Like, they weren't totally complete.
There was a writer in the later seasons. Actually, he might have been a writer on Lone Gunman, but I'm trying to think who it was. Like, it was maybe Thomas Schnauz or David Amman. But anyway, there was a writer who wanted to do an episode where the lone gunmen meet their female counterparts.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, that'd be
maybe
amazing.
They just thought that was a little too. Do you remember that episode of Seinfeld when they meet their evil twins?
Oh, vaguely.
So, yeah, it might. Yeah, I don't know. I think it would have been a great idea, but the lone. See, all right. So there's I don't know if you saw the movie Eternals. The Eternals back about 5 years ago. It was a Marvel movie. Okay. Now, those characters are basically supporting characters. I mean, you'll see them in like Avengers stories, right? And there's another very similar team in the Marvel universe that called the Inhumans that you would see in Fantastic Four. The point being is that they did a Inhumans movie and they did an Eternals movie, and they both bombed. The reason they both bombed is that those are supporting characters. Those are the characters that you see in, like I said, Fantastic Four or Avengers or whomever, whatever, much more interesting frontline character you can name. And that to me was really the pitfall of the lone gunman. The other pitfall too is that they really should have gotten other writers to handle that. They should have gotten writers who understand comedy better, who understand the actual logistics of putting comedy on television, which is completely different than drama. Completely, just totally different situation. And the guys they put in charge of that show were, three of the main producers on the X-Files. And it just doesn't always translate, you can't do it all. You can't, you have to know your limitations. I think it's very important, very creatively important to understand your limitations and what you can't do. Because I think a lot of disasters arise when people step out of their lane, so to speak, and try to deal with subject matter and genres that they're just not comfortable in. So
yeah, and maybe it's an aspect of interest too, because someone who could produce Breaking Bad, but then they couldn't do The Lone Gunman. I wonder if they just didn't have interest.
He was definitely interested.
Oh, really? Okay.
It was just beyond him. I mean, he wrote the episode about the vampires, Bad Blood, in the 5th season, which is it's always one of everybody's top 10 episode. And it's very funny too. It might be the funniest episode, but again, that's very hard to sustain. Very, very hard to sustain. And that's why comedians, maybe not so much today when they sort of become like podcasters and personalities, but it used to be that comedians would have a fairly short shelf life. You'd have a few examples, you'd have your George Carlins and your Jerry Seinfelds and your Richard Pryors and Robin Williams. I mean, you had a few who could sustain it, but they all did other things. I mean, notice they all did films and so on. It's just really hard. It's really, really hard. And believe me, I have total sympathy for people who have to get up every morning and be funny. On demand. It's just, oh my God, it was just a nightmare. I could never do it.
Oh, I understand. Yeah. I think there's so much, drug use in Hollywood, but seriously, oh my gosh. Well, let's see. One thing about the syndicate I'll just touch on is where one person who's been on the show, like Robert Young Pelton, kind of a great dangerous world adventurer. He was saying, it's not what you're afraid of that usually kills you. So that's the thing where, maybe like trying to bring light to who they are, sort of like, I don't know. But the X-Files are very entwined in Gen X, as you mentioned before. So
yes.
And I wonder, so like I say, the syndicate now, it's not underground. We were beginning to see it during the younger Gen X, and we're beginning to see it during the X-Files. Now it's on the surface. We know it to a great extent. But I feel like, so how is the X-Files so entwined in Gen X? And also, I feel like it's kind of showing, I think we're in a change of ages. It's not just generation. Like my dad's 97, and it's not just that he's older. It's not just he's beyond, he's not just boomer, he's older than the boomer generation. And so when I talk with him, we have a great relationship, but I realize like, you're not just older than me, like you're from a different age, like a whole different existence. Like your reality is different than mine. And I feel like the X-Files, so much like if you could touch on that, how it's so entwined with Gen X, but also I just feel that the X-Files is somehow helping a new age of people and how they need to see the world for their best survival.
Well, I do have a chapter on Gen X in the hardcover.
Oh, okay.
So I do go into that, how it really dovetailed with Gen X's cynicism and skepticism, but also, I mean, growing up when I did in the 70s, you always had the sense that life was, better for previous generations. Your uncles and your aunts and your older brothers and sisters, whomever, just had a better deal. And, we sort of had, growing up in the 70s, we had this, I don't know, we didn't have the best ride of it, but it did get better. It's funny because when you started like the late 70s, when you had Star Wars, particularly Star Wars, and Close Encounters, the culture began to change, and it started to become more youth friendly in the later 70s, whereas in the early and mid 70s it was extremely hostile to kids. I mean, the great example is, people point out that like Gen X is the generation that was seen as the devil, like Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist and It's Alive and The Omen and The Omen 2, what Omen 3 and whatever Omen. There was always this sort of through line that, particularly older Gen Xers like myself, like, we were inferior somehow. We were evil. We were a pain in the neck. We're no good nicks. Nothing will ever come of us that's any good, right? We'll never make any positive contribution to the world. And that's kind of like the understanding that you grew up in. So why wouldn't you be cynical? Why wouldn't you be skeptical? Why wouldn't you take a very jaundiced view of, particularly of political power?
And
it's inevitable, because again, I'm part of that sort of that first half of the Gen X generation, and we were just completely, I don't want to say beaten down, but it's kind of were, it's like we were seen as like intruders. The boomers had their whole thing going on, and they didn't want to have to share the spotlight. The boomers are the ones who invented the whole idea of like 40 is the new 20 and 70 is the new 30. Like they could never just move on and just sort of enjoy the fruits of their labors. They always had to be at the forefront, and it was the same way. I mean, a really interesting example that I don't think a lot of people almost think about sometimes is that, so like 82, 83, you had like MTV, and you had like all these new groups and like the new music, and then like starting like late 84, 85, 86, it was like all of a sudden like Eric Clapton and Don Henley and Stevie Nicks and Elton John, like all the old boomer stars had to reassert themselves. They couldn't give up the spotlight. And how many people like look at like whatever the Rolling Stones or Paul McCartney or Eric Clapton or David Bowie was doing in the 80s and think, yeah, that was top tier work, man. That was their best. Like nobody thinks that. Everybody thinks like, oh, well, yeah. And then they did all that crap in the 80s, right? Nobody thinks like, I've got to really listen to Never Let Me Down, David Bowie's 1987. I have to listen to, Steel Wheels by the Rolling Stones. Nobody thinks that. Like nobody cares. But it's like they couldn't let you really get that feeling too, like they couldn't let the younger generation get any attention whatsoever. And I think that does feed, even though the writers and producers of the X-Files were all older, they definitely picked up on that. They fed into that sense of I don't want to call it resentment, but in some ways it is, we were very resentful.
It helped, I think. So when I think about the X-Files and like in the changing of ages, I think about how you can kind of say, let's say from 1950, some people might say 1940, but like since from like 1950 to 1980, if you were a single income household, the guy went off every day and put, steering columns and Gran Torinos. You could afford a house. There's a stay-at-home mom. The kids went to college if they wanted to. Nobody really moved more than like 5 or 10 miles from where they were born. It was a wholly different world, you know.
Yeah, it was a much better world.
Yeah, because a much better world, you know. So there's some pros to it. But then in the 80s, as I see it, that's where you had IBM doing mass layoffs. That's where the world began to really change. When Gen X was, and that's also when Gen X was kind of going, oh, wait a second, here I am, I'm a person now, and this is my world. And I feel like one of the things what the X-Files did, and the whole, the truth is out there, and asking those big questions and contemplating and hanging out on Friday nights and watching it. And what I hope we can reinvigorate is get people doing that again. Everybody get together and have now you don't have to wait till Friday night. You can buy a season and everybody just binge watch, get together and have some fun, and binge watch
share some experiences.
Yeah, share some experiences, because I think that it may have helped. Why I say it helped in the changing of ages is I think about X-Files and 9/11. And of course there was that one episode with Lone Gunman and 9/11, which I think had some parallels. But I think one of the reasons why people automatically, right away after the initial shock, began to become investigative journalists. We kind of got to be a nation of investigative journalists.
Yes,
we didn't believe the story, and I think X-Files may have been a part of that, a seed that was planted. It was in our mind, and then we went, wait a second, the truth is out there. This doesn't make sense. And I know there's a syndicate, because now they're not even a mystery. We kind of know who they are in many cases. Now we live in a world of the X-Files. I think now it's every day for a lot of people. And getting back to maybe some of the source material that made us little Mulders and Scullys and Lone Gunmen, would be a great way to further reinvigorate that, because I think we're doing it, but we could be better at it. And watching the show with your friends or by yourself with the book, man, they won't have a chance next False Flag.
Well, they always seem to get away with it, but
they get away with it anyway. But we'll know. Yeah.
What you're really talking about is what is now called the fourth turning, and that you can look at history in 80-year cycles.
Yeah.
And these turnings, and the fourth turning at the end of the cycle, at the end of the 80-year cycle, is always the most profound. So by that timeline, it fits perfectly if you look at what's going on now.
Yes.
Where the world is contracting, really, from what we saw after the war, like in 1945. So exactly 80 years ago, where everything was about globalizing all these institutions and setting up the UN and the beginnings of the EU. The Clinton era is when we saw things like NAFTA and GATT and all these kind of things. But so there was a new type of worldview that came into power after World War II. And it worked for a while, but then it just, as worldviews tend to do, gets carried away with itself, and power always becomes about power. It always becomes about feeding itself, feeding power. I think that I don't know if the X-Files necessarily planted those seeds or just benefits from this natural cycle. So if people are, and they are, I mean, I know for a fact that people are always particularly younger people are always rediscovering the X-Files. But it's not, I don't think it's, I think it's a reflection of the culture rather than driving it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's reflecting what's going on in the world outside and capturing that kind of zeitgeist. And I think at the end of the day, that's the most you can really ask of any TV show or whatever, to make, to reflect our reality back to us so we can understand it, so we can see it in a different context, so we can see it from a different perspective. And that helps us to understand things better. And I think we need more of that. I mean, I really wish there were more writers and producers and actors and directors, who wanted to pick up that, that baton that the X-Files dropped. I know that there's talk about some sort of reboot and everything.
Mm.
I'm really skeptical that that's ever going to appear. I don't think that you can plug the X-Files back into the world of 2025 in the same way that I don't think it really worked when they tried to plug it back into the world of 2016,
No, it didn't.
And even though 2016 was like an X-Files kind of year, right? I just don't think it worked. And I think a lot of it's because the actors are too old for those roles. Really the appeal of, Mulder and Scully is like these two young people. They're young and they're idealistic and, they're sexy and all this kind of thing that when you see them like in their 50s and 60s, you're just kind of like, no, I don't think so. To me, the story ended with a second feature film in 2008. And I would not, had I been asked, which of course I wasn't, had I been asked, I would just say, no, don't do this. Don't push your luck, or maybe do like I don't know, something that isn't, trying to recapture that old magic, because you can never put that lightning back in a bottle, and again, I hate to say it, and I say it in the book, but it's just like they're not young and pretty anymore, and that unfortunately makes a big difference in television.
Oh, it does.
I wish it didn't, but I mean, just staring at Gillian Anderson's big pillowy lips every Friday night was a huge selling point for me back in the 90s. And I mean,
Yeah.
she's still an attractive woman, but the cigarettes and the bulimia and all the rest of it have kind of caught up with her. So
Yeah, it certainly
it
has.
happens to us all. Listen, nobody is immune from the ravages of time. But at the same point in time, you have to know when to leave the stage. There's actually a great line in an old X-Files episode, the great ones always know when to leave the stage.
Oh, yeah.
And I think about that all the time, because everything has its time. People want things to just go on forever, which is such a terrible mistake. People want another Star Trek series, another Star Wars, another Doctor Who. And it's just like, no. Every time you do that, you cheapen the value of the original variety, the original recipe. You just let things end, let things stop. Things need to stop. We need to miss things. Things need to go away so we can miss them,
Yeah.
So I don't want to see an X-Files revival. And plus, I mean, let's be frank. I mean, in the past 30 years, so many shows have tried to copy that formula. And I did a rather lengthy chapter sort of delving into some of these shows, and I didn't even scratch the surface. I think the whole format, which objectively is what they call the occult detective format, I just think it's played out. We need new ways to tell these kind of stories if we choose to do so. A few years ago, you had that show Debris. Did you watch that show Debris?
I didn't see it. No, Debris. No, I didn't.
It was just basically like, I mean, it's just the X-Files, pretty much. And then they did a show on Paramount Plus called Evil, which is sort of like a supernatural version of the X-Files, which kind of like Supernatural. I mean, we didn't need another one, but it's just like, I think that the format, the occult detective format, is just exhausted. Like, I don't mean like it's getting a little long in the tooth. Maybe you should start thinking about packing it in. I mean, it's over. There's no meat left on the bone. I mean, you're just sucking the marrow out of the bones for these stories. And I really hope that, again, just kind of thinking that it's probably not going to go down. But I really, at the same time, I hope it doesn't, because it's going to suck.
Yeah.
It's absolutely going to suck. That's one thing I can guarantee you, is that it's going to suck, because these things always suck.
They always
Always.
suck.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
How many successful reboots can you even name? Particularly when series have been so well exploited. So you had, like, say, like Star Trek: The Next Generation in the 80s,
Hmm.
right? But that worked because you basically had 3 seasons of the original series, and then I think at that point there was like 4 movies, 4 feature films. So it was still virgin territory. There was still
Yeah.
places
And it
to
was different.
explore.
It was different. Next
Yeah.
Generation was not the original Star Wars. I mean, I mean,
Star
Star
Trek.
Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah, Star
Yeah.
Trek. It wasn't. It was different enough to be something new. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yep.
so yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And then
Uh,
I always like Deep Space Nine. I thought was really
oh
cool.
yeah. I'm if I could only watch one Star Trek, which I think at this point I don't need to watch anything else, Deep Space Nine to me
Yeah,
was almost like the perfect series.
it really was. It was.
It was so well executed, but it was also so well planned. I mean,
Yeah,
one of the things that people complain about the X-Files is that it always just seemed to be a little seat of the pantsy,
yeah,
whereas Deep Space Nine, it was so clearly, spelled out and laid out and worked out before they even start the season. You could just feel that they already
mm,
had a sense of where they wanted the season to go from beginning to end.
yeah,
And in some ways, like, the X-Files strength was what they didn't do that, because they
yeah,
were able to, Chris Carter had said, like, we didn't want to do that because we wanted to be able to react to things that were going on,
mm,
when they were going on, so they wanted to
yeah,
do stories that would incorporate things that were happening in the world outside while they were still relevant, while people were still discussing them and thinking about them.
yeah,
And when you micromanage a season, there's a lot to be said for that. A lot to be said for planning things out before you start filming. But at the same time, there's a lot to be said for keeping things open, because let's face it. I mean, Deep Space Nine was a series that I love, but not a lot of people watched.
yeah. It wasn't very popular, but it was amazing.
No,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you something else. I remember watching it like after midnight on like
Mm,
channel 11, which was like the syndicated sort of independent TV station in New York at the time. So it wasn't even getting played in prime time. It was like being aired after midnight. And I was just like, gosh, and then that god awful Voyager series was getting all the
oh,
attention, which I loathed so intensely. I still, there used to be a great YouTube site that would just make fun of Voyager, which I just loved. And it seems to have, I guess they got shut down, but it was beautiful. It was amazing.
it deserved it. And one thing about Deep Space Nine is I think especially if you have a nice big screen and some good sound. The beginning of Deep Space Nine, the way they captured the emptiness, like
Mm.
how far away they were, just how they captured that space that you're so
Mm.
far out there in the middle of your. It's like you really feel. I always thought the beginning was my favorite part, just because they just capture something there, like you really are in deep space. They
Well, the
like,
other thing I really like about that series too is that it's basically about religion.
really? Okay.
It's about a conflict of, it's about a clash of religions, because you have the Bajorans, who are very devout, they're prophets, which basically the Council of Nine, but and then you have like all these different races, basically, who all are animated by their particular religious outlook, whether it's theistic or secular. And that to me is really interesting, because you had the Klingons, who are very religious, you had the Bajorans, who are very religious, and then you had
The
the
Ferengi.
Vortids, who basically worshipped the Dominion, right, as
Yeah.
gods. And then you had the Ferengi, which is always hilarious. And it really was a show that was about worldviews and conflicting worldviews. You can't say that about any of the other Star Trek series.
Yeah.
For better or worse. But
Yeah.
maybe they had that privilege because nobody was watching it. When you have a show that the network is going to keep going for a certain number of years, but not a lot of people are watching it, kind of gives you a lot of freedom. And that is kind of the story in the first season of the X-Files.
X-Files,
the ratings were very low, so they could do a lot of things. They could get away with a lot of things that other series couldn't get away with, and maybe they couldn't get away with later on when they became more popular. And I'm always really, fired up by that kind of like, let's just try this. Let's just throw this against the wall and see if it sticks. That kind of, I think it's an adventurous. I don't know.
Adventurists, yeah.
It's adventurousness, I think, is the term.
Yeah.
And that's what we all want. We all want to be taken away on an adventure.
Yeah.
And one of the things it's kind of interesting. So before the book came out, I had met Frank Spotnitz, who was basically Chris Carter's right-hand man at the X-Files Museum up in Saratoga Springs. And he said something that really stuck with me, and I think it applies to more than the X-Files. He said, after a while, the stories just become about the show. Like the show becomes a story about itself. And I think that is, that's an inevitable downfall of any long-running TV show, is that it just eventually becomes about itself, and people get tired of it after a while, because all TV shows, particularly if they've been on for a number of seasons, they fall back into sort of the stock riffs. They fall back into sort of the stock storylines. And when you've done, by the time the X-Files originally went off the air, they had done 200 episodes of TV, and a feature film. So that's basically, it's like making 100 movies, but maybe even more, because I've always said that a lot of X-Files movies, if you add in sort of all the exposition stuff that you didn't need to add in a TV series, but you have to add in a movie, especially all the great like horror standalones like Home and
Breed.
What's that?
Breed. Yeah.
Breed.
Oh, that episode of X-Files just came to mind. Sorry about that.
I'm not familiar with an episode called Breed.
Wasn't there one called Breed? It was about the inbred people.
That's Home.
Home. Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah. That's why it flashed. I thought it was called Breed. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and the host, and those could all be really good feature films.
Oh, they could be, especially
back in the day. Back in the day when feature films weren't theme park rides.
Home kind of was. That's Deliverance. But
back in the day, like, back in the 80s, when you just go see like a movie that's like a crime story, it didn't have to be like a $50,000 million trillion theme park ride, like like a Transformers or an X-Men movie or whatever. It could just be a story that's like based on a novel or something. Something like Presumed Innocent, like Harrison Ford. It's another movie, Jagged Edge. FX. There were just a lot of really interesting movies that were self-contained stories and weren't reliant on CGI. And I'll tell you something, I'd love to have those days back. If I never see another shred of CGI on screen in my entire life, I'll be a very happy man. So.
I agree. I agree. I think it's one of the things about being, Gen X. I guess I'm 55, so I'm in that territory. And yeah, it's hard to not miss the 80s and the 90s. It is. It's like, it's hard not to kind of miss the world before January 2019 for some, but uh so I've had you longer than we were even planning. So I appreciate your time. Don't want to keep you forever, but I do think definitely the book, XF-Ultra, the X-Files, Conspiracy Culture, and the National Security State. Get it, check it out. You're going to see the X-Files. And you get a book with all these, covert files in it and like supplemental intelligence for different episodes and different seasons. It's really great. You get a
Thank
lot of
you.
education on like Gnosticism and all kinds of stuff that's in the book, and great thing to do with your friends. And I guess I would just leave it with you'll even start to see things in the X-Files you hadn't thought of, like in the book you mentioned Melissa. Well, Scully Melissa Scully. Melissa Scully tries to assure her sister that Mulder is still alive, and you mentioned it confirms your theory that the Scully women were all psychic, and even stuff
Mm,
like that. I thought, whoa, I'd
mm.
never really thought about the meaning of like Melissa and Dana, and now I go, oh, that's actually really deep. And I think, a lot of people within their own, at this time, maybe always, science and spirituality, supernatural spirituality, like, you know, Melissa and Scully kind of were a balanced being in a way.
Well, there were definitely opposites. There was
Yeah.
actually the original idea was to have Melissa Scully be a love interest for Mulder.
Oh,
Yeah,
but
and that never really came off. And
I get it.
they wanted to make her a more recurring character, but it's kind of sad. So what had happened is that the actress who played Melissa, Melinda McGraw, had landed a starring role in a series. So she said, "Oh,
Oh,
I can't be in the X Files anymore." So they killed her character off, which they always do when
yeah.
in those kind of situations. And then like the show like lasted like 3 weeks or something. It was I
Oh,
would have liked to have seen, there are a lot of characters they killed off that I wish they didn't. But
yeah. Although if she hadn't left the show, I mean, I think one of the things that makes the X Files is like, and like I'll let you go because you got to get going, of course. But is that whole tension between Mulder and Scully, and I think if he'd had a love interest, it really wouldn't have been there. And I just think it was so fundamental to it. Like everybody wanted them to get it on, but now when I look at the seasons again, I go, it just seems weird. I'm like, no,
well,
you know.
I mean, the thing that I say, and I've always said, is that like it's a science fiction story. And when in that first episode, when Scully comes in, it's like, "Oh, Mulder, would you look at my naked ass for
Yeah.
see if I have any alien implants or something?" And she
Yeah.
takes her bathrobe off. It's just like, come on.
Uh,
Like in a real life setting, like how does that not end up in bed, right? It's just like
yeah.
that, I mean, it just would never happen. I mean, that there's just no way in a real world setting that that exact situation would not end up. Well, they did end
Yeah.
up in bed, but I guess you can sort
Seasons.
of like your
Yeah.
head can and you can place, fill in the gaps there. But just that
Yeah.
very first episode, I'm just like, come on, come on now. That
Oh,
would never happen in real life,
oh, I get it. I get it. Well, at least Frohickey knew what was up. He was always hitting on Scully.
Yeah.
Go Frohickey.
Yeah, I'll have to find a picture. That guy I knew who was just basically, it's uncanny. Like
Wow.
he was just basically like young Frohickey. So
Oh, that's so amazing. Well,
yeah, and he was a
um,
hacker too. So
oh, perfect. Well, Christopher Knowles, everybody check out the book, but also, I mean, really, on Patreon, the Secret Sun Institute, I'll link to it in the show notes. One thing that Christopher does is he really kicks out the content on Patreon, and it's all amazing stuff. Like coming up soon is the Darker Side of Darkness. Like recently, you also did well, a lot on Anne Heche. I mean, really
hmm
did some
hmm
deep diving on that. I think is it out yet? Like Jen Wasteland, Chris Knowles. Is that one coming out? Did you
that's
do that
out.
one yet?
That is out.
That's out.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's
And
out.
then
Yeah.
the Secret History of Goth was really interesting, especially if you're a music fan. And so the nice thing is that if you belong to Christopher's Patreon, there's a hangout. I mean, he puts out content people get together. It's good. You know, I think a lot of content creators don't sort of do the webinar kind of thing, you know, and you go, okay, this doesn't have to, well, it's very good, but you go, I'll just gather my data and my material, things that I'm interested in, and I'll hang out with the crew and I'll put it out there. And that's rare, you know, it's rare. So
I
it's a
guess, I
good
mean,
thing.
you know, I just thought that's the way you do it.
It's the way you do it. I don't know if it's the way it's usually done. You know,
Yeah.
you're not a mystery to people who like the work you've done. So, you know, and you're always delving into the synchromysticism. And definitely, you know, if you're new to Chris Knowles, check out the synchromysticism of Anne Heche. That is really, you know, phenomenal stuff. I mean, you probably don't know all that he's put forth about it, and it'll get you. You know, you can't help but have a lot of
It's a
empathy, you know.
wild story for sure.
Yeah.
Horrible story, but
Yeah. Horrible
that's
story.
life, is it
That's
not?
life. In the fast lane when your car's been remote controlled.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been great. And well, take care. Talk to you again.
Let's do it again soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.